Have you ever finished a conversation and then replayed it for the rest of the night? Not because anything went wrong, but because your mind refuses to let it go. You analyze the pause, the tone, the way they looked at you. You remember a sentence you said, and suddenly it sounds different, too sharp, too awkward, too much. So you replay it again. You imagine how they heard it. You imagine what they might have meant. You imagine what you should have said instead, and without realizing it, you're no longer in the present. You're in 10 different possible futures. If this feels familiar, you're not just thinking too much. You're carrying a mind that learned very early that awareness equals safety. And once a brain learns that, it doesn't easily turn it off. Overthinkers aren't just thinkers, they're scanners. You reread your message 3 times before sending it. Then you reread it again after. You check if it sounds cold. You check if it sounds too eager. You delete words that might be misunderstood. You add emojis to soften tone. You remove emojis so you don't seem immature. You don't call it anxiety. You call it being careful. You notice when someone replies okay instead of okay. You notice when a reply is 5 minutes slower than usual. You notice when their energy feels slightly different. To most people, these are neutral details. To you, they are signals. Because somewhere in your life, missing a signal didn't feel safe. Maybe tension used to rise quickly. Maybe moods changed unpredictably. Maybe you learned that being unprepared meant being hurt, so your brain adapted. It became alert, not loud, not dramatic, just constantly aware. And now, even when nothing is wrong, your mind keeps scanning, just in case. There's a quiet belief underneath overthinking. If I think about it enough, I can prevent something bad from happening. If you replay the conversation enough, you'll catch the mistake. If you analyze the decision enough, you'll avoid regret. If you simulate every outcome, you'll be prepared. It feels responsible. It feels intelligent. But most overthinking isn't problem solving, it's rumination. Problem solving ends with action. Rumination loops. And it loops because your brain is searching for certainty. But certainty is rare. So your mind keeps working overtime, trying to design a future where nothing hurts. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't overthink because you're weak. You overthink because you don't trust that you can handle things if they go wrong. So you try to prevent them instead. You are probably compassionate toward others. You understand context. You excuse behavior. You imagine what someone might be going through, but when it comes to yourself, the lens sharpens. You remember something slightly awkward you said from years ago, and you still cringe. You still feel the heat in your face. The other person probably forgot it the next day, but your mind archived it. Because mistakes feel dangerous, you assume people notice your flaws. You assume your tone mattered more than it did. But most people are not analysing you the way you analyse yourself. They are busy thinking about themselves. Overthinkers project their depth outward. You assume others are as observant, as critical, as mentally active, but they're not. And your brain works over time for judgment that rarely exists. That's invisible labour. And invisible labour is exhausting. For most people, silence is neutral. For you, silence is information. A delayed reply feels like tension. A short message feels like distance. A slight shift feels like danger. Your mind fills in the blanks instantly, not because you're insecure, because ambiguity feels unsafe. Waiting without knowing feels unbearable. So you predict, you rehearse, you prepare emotionally for rejection. That hasn't happened. And most of the time, it never does. But your body still absorbs the stress. That's why you feel tired on days when nothing happened. Because internally, everything happened. In relationships, this pattern deepens. You anticipate needs. You adjust your tone. You become agreeable, easier, smaller, not because you lack personality, because you want stability. Here's something uncomfortable. Overthinking makes you feel responsible. But it can also make you disappear. You don't want to be misunderstood, so you pre-edit yourself. You don't want conflict, so you soften your opinions. You don't want rejection, so you become the safest version of yourself. And slowly, you shrink. You say it's fine quickly, even when it isn't. Because explaining feels heavier than carrying it alone. And sometimes you're not tired from life. You're tired from being composed. Underneath all the analysis, there is fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of not being enough. Overthinking isn't perfectionism, it's preservation. Your mind is trying to preserve connection, to preserve safety, to preserve belonging. But preservation through constant prediction becomes exhaustion, because your nervous system never gets the message that you survived. It still believes danger is near, even when you are safe. Your awareness is not the problem. Your depth is not the problem. The problem is that your awareness never rests. You are aware of everything, but you rarely allow yourself to be unaware. What if, instead of asking, "What if this goes wrong?" you asked, "If it does, can I handle it?" You probably can. You've handled hard things before. You've survived discomfort before. Your brain just hasn't updated that information. It still believes preparation is safer than trust, but resilience is already in you. You don't need to prevent every possible pain. You only need to trust that you can survive it. If you overthink everything, it's not because you're broken. It's because your mind learned to survive by scanning. And that skill once protected you. But you are not in that environment anymore. You don't need to rehearse every future. You don't need to pre-approve every sentence. You don't need to be perfect to be safe. Sometimes peace begins when you let one thought exist without trying to fix it. You don't need to control every outcome. You only need to trust that if something happens, you can handle it. And you can. You always have.